right. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered Faith. My name is Alonso Garcia, and I have the privilege of being your host. We've been working through a series on leaders in the Bible. We've been focusing the last 2 weeks on leaders in the New Testament, and today's episodes, we've looked at James, and we are now going to look at Peter. Now, Peter, we've put into two different parts, and I want to give some background on Peter, and I want to start with this example of what it is to be obedient and how he struggled with obedience. Now, Peter is often a person that we say, oh, you know, he's a mighty man of God. We make this big deal about how he had faith to walk on water, and I want to outline this passage and talk about some of these points before we get into Peter and his leadership challenges, because I think it'll make more sense when we put the two together. So, Jesus never said to get out of the boat. Okay? Never said it. Now, Peter walked on water. Nobody that we know of has since repeated this feat, right? Feat, get it? Now, we have folks, you've probably heard the joke more than once. I know I've heard it more than I care to have listened to it, that, you know, somebody else is walking on the water, and or Jesus, whoever it is, they substitute whoever walking on the water, and they say, yeah, he knows where the rocks are. Well, that may be, and Jesus made the rocks. I suppose he knows where all the rocks are. And if you are wanting to impress people and look like you're walking on water, then you will carefully place those stones as well. Now, I pastor a Pentecostal church. I am a Pentecostal believer. Pentecostals believe that there are greater works. Now, many believe that walking on water, like Peter did, is one of the greater works. Now, maybe a small part of that is true, but really what this is, right? Like I said, it's going to make sense when we get into Peter's story here in a minute, is that God saves us from our own foolishness. God saves us from our own foolishness. Now, we're going to read out of Matthew chapter 14. It's a little bit lengthy. I apologize for the length. You can follow along in your Bibles if you are. I'm teaching out of the ESV. Matthew 14:22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And on the fourth watch, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, sometimes we spend more time explaining God than we do obeying him. So let's look at this passage. Verse 22. This is the instruction. Immediately, right now, at the moment, in that instant. He made the disciples get into the boat. So get in the boat and go before him to the other side. Go to the other side. There are two instructions that Jesus gives. People make a big deal about obedience. They want to make a big deal about Peter. He's this mighty giant of faith. Jesus gave two straightforward, incredibly simple instructions. Number one, get into the boat. Number two, go to the other side. Now, what isn't said in all of that is that Jesus also didn't command them to fall out of the boat, to drown, to try walking on water themselves. He didn't say anything about going fishing. He didn't say any of those things. He said, get in the boat, one, go to the other side, two. Two simple instructions. Then says he dismissed the crowds. He went up on the mountain by himself to pray. People make sermons about that. They're like, if you want to do the mighty things of Jesus, you need to spend time on the mountaintop. You need to pray on the mountain. I'm not saying you shouldn't pray, but they make a big deal in this passage, right? When evening came, he was there alone. Jesus had to work really hard to spend time alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land. So we're not told exactly what time or which watch Jesus made the disciples get into the boat, go to the other side. We're not told what time he went by himself to pray, but the way the passage is structured, things may have happened in the morning, then the afternoon, he goes up to the mountain to pray, then it's evening, he's there by himself. So maybe, 4, 5, 6 hours. The boat is a long way from the land. The wild thing about being in a boat is when you can't see the land, it's a little scary. But the other thing about being in a boat is the further you get from one shore, the closer you get to the other shore. And remember, Jesus said, get in the boat, go to the other side. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, it is a ghost, and they cried out in fear. So we're not told how far away the boat is from the land, other than it is a long way off. We are told that Jesus went to the mountain and prayed. The wind is against them. That's what the passage says. And the average human may walk 3 to 4 miles an hour. So we don't know how long Jesus was walking on the water, like striding out, getting his steps in, right? Got to get those, 6,000 steps in today. He's out there getting his steps in on the water. He told the disciples two things. One, get in the boat. Two, go to the other side. I will catch up with you on the way. And they see him. They cry out, say, it is a ghost. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Again, we are not told how far the boat is, other than it's a long way. We are not told how far away Jesus was when they saw him and cried out, it is a ghost. We can assume one of two things at minimum, the risk of oversimplification. The power of Jesus' voice, it carried across the sea and the wind and the waves, and through their lack of visibility in the midst of a storm. Or he was pretty close to the boat and they were able to see him and hear him. One of those two, or somewhere in between, is likely the most accurate. So it says, Jesus spoke to them, saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him. This is where we get this idea that Peter is somehow a giant of the faith. Can I tell you, before I get into explaining this particular passage, Peter is disobedient. He is rebellious, and he disobeys God. What were the two things Jesus said? Get in the boat, go to the other side. No confusion, no complication there. Get in the boat, go to the other side. So Peter, who makes tremendous mistakes, he says, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. I told you to get in the boat. I told you to go to the other side. You want to get out of the boat? Go ahead. Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, like did he not see the wind before? It says that the wind was against him. When he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Now that is perhaps the most important, simplest, easiest to wrap your mind around prayer that you could ever pray. Lord, save me. Peter, disobedient. He says, I want to do what I want to do. Jesus says, go ahead, do what you want to do. Peter gets out. Now, I've heard people say, that once Peter lost sight of Jesus, he began to sink. Again, we're not told how far away Jesus is. Peter gets out of the boat. Like, I don't know if you've been in a boat on water, but like water's not very solid, right? Like you get out of the boat and you're right there at the boat. Now it says he walked on the water. It doesn't say how far he walked on the water, but he was clearly, again, this is a distance thing, right? He was clearly close enough that Jesus was able to get to him soon enough to prevent him from drowning. Lord, save me. It's probably the only sensible thing in this passage that Peter should be lauded for is he acknowledges his own foolishness, stupidity, if I may say so, and outright rebellion against the word of the Lord Jesus Christ. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took hold of him, and saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, most people preach that as, if you believed me enough, you would have been able to continue on the water. But the passage doesn't bear that out. The passage is that Jesus told them to get in the boat and to go to the other side. Peter lost hope and faith that Jesus would keep his word when he said, go to the other side. He also, right, is kind and compassionate by not really calling Peter out for his silliness. We could say it that way. He's gracious to him. Maybe we can learn something from that. They got in the boat. The wind ceased, which the wind may have ceased anyway when Jesus got to the boat. Peter just didn't give him time to get to the boat for the wind to cease. Now, did he? Those in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Now, sometimes, as I said earlier, we spend more time explaining God than we do obeying him. If Jesus tells you to get in the boat, get in the boat. If he tells you to go to the other side, I can give you some great free advice. Go to the other side. Now, look to Jesus. Keep looking to Jesus. Peter was surrounded by chaos and a problem of his own making. Now, Peter stated the issue, right, when he got out of the boat. Because he was out of the boat, he stopped looking at Jesus. And when Jesus commands you, obey him, not get out of the boat and come unto me, but get in the boat and go to the other side. Peter would still be safe and dry in the story if he simply followed Jesus. Now, he might have got, wet by the rain and the wind and those things that were against them, but he would not have been at risk of drowning, which is what Peter clearly felt like he was in the midst of. Now, just simply obey Jesus. That's it. Like Naaman, Jesus tells Peter and everyone in the boat to do literally the simplest thing. Should I say it again? Get in the boat, go to the other side. Now, Peter never walked on water again. If he did, we weren't told. Now, faith in this story, right, is simply taking the next step. Now, what we see about Peter's faith is that Peter's faith is born out of disobedience. Now, faith unleashes the supernatural. Peter did not experience the supernatural power of God that allowed him to walk on water until he disobeyed, as evidenced by his actions. Now, that's what the world sees, right? that, disobedience and faith, they somehow go together. That's what the church sometimes puts together, the disobedience and faith, these greater works, that Peter and his walking on the water is a greater work, when the root of the story is that Peter is disobedient. We revel, right, in Peter's faith. But let me tell you, disobedience and fear will both sink you. We revel in his faith because he walked on water. Peter had faith? Yes, he walked on water. But he only had faith because he put himself in a terrible position of his own making that only God could save him from. Now, Jesus, he's probably saved you from many things. Jesus saved Peter not only from hell, but on that occasion, he saved him from drowning himself. Peter almost drowned because of his own bad decision. A little faith is better than no faith, right? Little obedience is better than lots of rebellion. You ever notice the guys in the boat? Maybe they had no faith, right? You could say. But they were smart enough to stay where Jesus told them to sit. Now, that is an essential component of what we're going to look at in Peter's story. So, without further ado, now that we've broken down that this pattern of failure, this one particular incident that I think is really significant in Peter's life and in this leadership series, we're going to look at Peter and his call to lead despite failure.